Rory Gilmore from Gilmore Girls is often portrayed as an exceptionally well-read character, especially given her academic background and her love for literature. Throughout the show, we see her devour books and excel in her studies, particularly in English literature. However, whether or not she is genuinely well-read can be examined from different angles. Her range of reading, her motivations, and how her reading impacts her life and character development.
Books.
I need all of my other books.
You don't need all these.
I think I do.
The Edna St. Vincent Millay?
That's my bus book.
Uh-huh. What's the Faulkner?
My other bus book.
So just take one bus book.
No, the Millay is a biography. And sometimes, if I'm on the bus and I pull out a biography and I think to myself, well, I don't really feel like reading about a person's life right now, then I'll switch to the novel. And then sometimes if I'm not into the novel, I'll switch back.
Still there, Michelle?
Yes,
Hold on. What is the Gore Vidal?
Oh, that's my lunch book.
Uh-huh. So lose the Vidal or the Faulkner. You don't need two novels.
Vidal's essays.
Uh-huh. But the Eudora Welty's not essays or a biography.
Right.
So it's another novel. Lose it.
It's short stories.
Ugh, this is a sickness.
Last few years, I've been following the Rory Gilmore Reading Challenge, and while it's fun to revisit the TV show through this lens, I'm curious if Rory was actually as well-read as I remember her being. Rory's reading habits are often depicted as extensive and varied by the showrunners and hardcore fans. In the earlier seasons, Rory reads books from authors like F. Scott Fitzgerald, Virginia Woolf, and William Shakespeare that could easily be found on any high schooler's English studies reading lists. And because she's never without a book that appears highbrow, Rory seems like she's a well-read character. After all, by the show's end, Rory has read just about 350 titles, from classics and contemporary titles, like The Great Gatsby and Pride and Prejudice, to more modern works by authors like Margaret Atwood and Don DeLillo. But is she well-read in a traditional sense? Yes, at face value, Rory does seem to have an impressive knowledge of literary classics, particularly in the canon of Western literature. However, it's worth noting that her reading list is often focused on a specific literary tradition that is full of white and highbrow authors, and Rory's engagement with books outside of the Western traditional canon is limited of many authors of color or international literature, causing them to be less emphasized. As a matter of fact, Rory only reads or mentions about 14 authors of color, with Toni Morrison, Isabel Allende, and Amy Tan being the most prominent American authors of color on her reading list. For international authors of color, the showrunners have Rory stick to books that would have made a splash and seem to lean more into the Oprah Book Club lane, such as Brick Lane by Monica Ali, and The Namesake by Jhumpa Lahiri, and the heavily censored Satanic Verses by Salman Rushdie. These choices feel as if they were added as an afterthought. In a way, the books feel more like a placeholder for Rory to approach reading like she does most other things throughout the series, which is as the smart person she thinks she should be to make her grandparents or Lorelai happy and fit the mold everyone around her claims she is.
Exactly. Rory is special.
Well, I know that Rory's special.
Got it. Dean is special too, Grandpa.
Rory.
You don't even know him.
I know enough.
No, you don't. Dean is incredible, and he's special to me, and I bring him here, and you attack him.
I will not be spoken to like that in my house.
Richard, here, give her the book.
This family has standards. You live up to them, and you should expect that everyone you spend time with live up to them also. You are a gifted girl with immense promise, and you should learn very early that certain people can hold you back.
Grandpa, stop it. You cannot treat Dean this way.
Sorry, excuse me.
These diverse book choices are also interesting as reading choices because they often don't get seen on the show like the more popular white authors of the time do. Instead, the showrunners work mentioning these books into the dialogue of Gilmore Girls.
So Salman wants to come over for dinner this weekend.
Is he bringing that boring wife of his?
Padma is fine.
Cookbooks, Doyle. Your husband wrote the Satanic Verses, and all you want to talk about is cookbooks.
This feeds into the theory that Rory's readings are often in line with what would be expected of someone with a classical academic background, especially someone pursuing a career in journalism or English literature.
Breathe, breathe.
I'm a failure.
What?
I am stupid.
Oh, stop.
I'm uninformed and ignorant and I can't even think of a second synonym for uninformed. I suck.
Honey.
13 million volumes? I've read like, what, 300 books in my entire life and I'm already 16? Do you know how long it would take me to read 13 million books?
But honey, you don't have to read every one of them. Tuesdays with Maury, skip that.
The second thing that I kind of touched on earlier about Rory's reading choices is that her reading seems to be largely motivated by her academic pursuits and her desire to meet external expectation. This means that she often is reading or doing most things based on whether it will impress her mother, help her to succeed at school, or if it can help her to live up to the expectations of people who she seeks validation from, like her grandparents or professors. In this way, reading is often used on Gilmore Girls to show Rory as an ambitious student who is only reading to excel and fit an image of a studious person, rather than showing Rory actually reading for her own personal enjoyment or because she has any intellectual curiosity. So, is Rory's reading more about performance than passion? In some cases, yes. Rory often reads extensively to maintain her image as an intelligent, accomplished individual, but her true passion for books isn't always clear. She has moments where her reading and engagement with books seem more like an obligation than a genuine exploration of ideas. For example, in college, we see Rory struggle with her identity and her future, and her reading starts to feel more like a way to navigate expectations rather than a source of personal growth or enjoyment. For example, in college, we see Rory struggle with her identity and her future, and her reading. This drifting behavior is understandable, but we never see Rory browsing the stacks in the library or a bookstore because she wants to for pleasure. And this is surprising because Gilmore Girls aired at the height of chain bookstores like Barnes and Nobles and Borders, cropping up everywhere and stamping out indie booksellers. Yet, never do we see Rory entering into one of these stores. Issue at hand with Rory. Never do the showrunners show her do anything that goes beyond surface-level reading, where she's engaging with anything she reads or questioning her reading materials. Throughout Gilmore Girls, Rory is shown as someone who is very adept at reading and analyzing books at an academic level. She can quote works from authors and interpret them, but her ability to engage deeply with the material or challenge herself intellectually is sometimes called into question. For instance, Rory often reads books with the goal of excelling in exams or impressing others, rather than developing a true personal relationship with the material. This might mean she's well-read in a conventional sense, but her intellectual curiosity might not always be as deep or sincere as someone who reads for pure enjoyment or to expand their worldview. Because of this performance nature to her reading, I've come to realize that Rory isn't actually well-read, like Jess, who actually was curious about what he read and the world he lived in. Unlike Jess, Rory never seems to think critically about what she reads. And this goes back to the question of Rory never being shown choosing any of her books. At her core, Rory is a sponge for whoever is around her, be it Lorelai, Logan, her grandparents, or the competition she engages in with Paris. While Rory can analyze and interpret what she reads, she rarely does any critical engagement with books to reflect on what they could teach her. For example, when Rory is dealing with difficult issues in her personal life, like her career and Mitchum telling her she doesn't have what it takes to be a journalist, she often lacks the emotional maturity to deeply reflect on her actions, and she easily folds under pressure. Instead of having developed actual critical thinking skills that a person who is well-read and able to build comprehension alongside their reading. This shortcoming is amplified by the fact that the Gilmore Girls showrunners did not offer Rory many chances in early season growing up in Stars Hollow to learn life skills because of her sheltered life within the town, and then in the time that she is thrust into the upper-crust rich lifestyle of Emily and Richard's circle during her Chilton and Yale years. This lack of character development creates a gap between Rory's image as a well-read person who should be able to comprehend that Mitchum is just one voice in her career field, and that if she reassesses, she can bounce back from his criticism into a person who has the thing that Mitchum is suggesting, which is intellectual curiosity. Because Rory relies so heavily on her image of having had a lot of academic success, and being an introverted person who reads what she thinks will get her the most praise from her grandparents Lorelai and her teachers, she never chooses to find things out for herself or seeks knowledge on her own. This causes her to easily fold under Mitchum's criticism. And this folding suggests that while Rory might be well-read in terms of quantity, she hasn't ever really learned the lesson of reading about adversity and character building because she never sought out books that she was interested in or read critically to understand outside of an assignment. So when we see her in her 30s in the Year in a Life series, Rory has yet to develop that kind of reflective, personal engagement with herself that most well-read people have acquired by that age. I'd argue this would have come much easier if Rory's character wasn't made to just read literature at a topical level throughout the series, and the showrunners used her reading to grow her character beyond her WASP persona and aesthetic to make her into someone who was actually well-read and truly intellectually curious. So, is she actually well-read? Yes and no. That Rory was undoubtedly well-read for her Connecticut town in terms of the number of books she read in her Chilton years, especially if we're only counting her knowledge of the Western literary canon. This lets her character easily fit into the stereotypical archetype of the bookish, intelligent student who has an expansive reading list. And while Rory is well-read, her character arc also lacks the ability to balance learning how to blend her academic success with acquiring emotional intelligence and personal fulfillment. In the later seasons, Rory's struggles to define her own identity, apart from the roles that others have expected her to play, highlight the ways in which her reading and knowledge, while impressive, have not always led to the personal wisdom or maturity that might come from a more genuine personal engagement with ideas. This could also be a part of the showrunner's choice to limit the depth of Rory's engagement with any of the books she's read and only have them shaped by external expectations from her family, peers, and teachers. This makes Rory's reading feel performative rather than what we would expect from her character to use reading for, which is to be intellectually transformed. This also causes stagnation to the growth of her character throughout the series, since it could have easily helped her discover who she is beyond her accomplishments much earlier and kept the train wreck version we get in A Year in the Life from happening if she had only learned to think critically and relate to a diverse range of books, cultures, characters, ideas, and knowledge formats. So, even though Rory Gilmore is certainly well-read, at least in the sense of having an impressive amount of knowledge about classic literature and major works in the Western canon, the depth of her reading, both in terms of subject matter, intellectual engagement, and emotional maturity, is lacking. This causes much of the reading we see Rory do over the course of the series seems driven by her academic and external pressures rather than any true passion or curiosity she may have. Thanks to this, while Rory is often portrayed as an intellectual person, her journey in the Gilmore Girls series shows that being well-read doesn't necessarily always equate to being emotionally or personally fulfilled.